A federal investigation.
I think the government is preparing to indict.
Into New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell and a member of her security detail, Officer Jeffrey Vappie.
In regards to Officer Jeffrey Vappie, a senior police officer within the New Orleans Police Department, over 25 years there, no doubt about that, is a valued and trusted advisor.
Our reporting started by looking at the time the mayor spent outside the office. In 2022 and 23, Mayor Cantrell spent 20% of each year traveling, much of that time internationally to Korea, France, Africa, Switzerland, the list goes on.
Is it really in the best interest of the mayor to be outside of the city that often?
The travel more than any other previous mayor. And when in New Orleans, a look at the mayor's daily calendar revealed limited meetings. Digging deeper, we found Cantrell skipped appointments, showed up hours late to work, sometimes spent the entire workday locked up in this French Quarter apartment, sending no work emails, making no work calls. Would appear to be a light workload while the city faces important issues impacting New Orleans residents: high crime, broken streets, broken streetlights, and a fragile drainage system that can frequently flood many city streets.
Taxpayers have a right to know what duties you are performing during those hours.
According to a UNO poll, the majority of New Orleanians are dissatisfied with life in New Orleans and think the city is headed in the wrong direction.
New Orleanians are not happy with the direction of the city.
No,
right?
absolutely not. They feel that it's become a worse place to live, and they are dissatisfied with life here.
All of that serves as a backdrop for the heart of our investigation. We reviewed more than 1,000 hours of public security camera video, hundreds of pages of documents, and found the mayor spent much of her time on those trips and in New Orleans with one member of her security team, Officer Jeffrey Vappie.
Well, I think taxpayers would say if he's a police officer, why isn't he doing police work?
Some members of her security detail called the time Cantrell and Vappie spent together in a city-owned apartment inappropriate and voiced concerns about the behavior.
You feel like he crossed that line of professionalism with his protection duties?
The way it looks, yeah, look bad.
Fox 8 has received 2 federal subpoenas asking for video of every story we've aired on the mayor.
It just indicates to me that everybody's putting in their mouthpieces and putting on their eye black because there may be a coming storm.
Our story started with a simple tip. The mayor of New Orleans was utilizing a city-owned apartment for her personal use. It led to a federal investigation launched after our reports about the mayor's time outside the office. We received this picture last month. The source took it in July 2022. The mayor and Officer Jeffrey Vappie sitting at the bar of the steakhouse Doris Metropolitan. Both have filled glasses of wine. Vappie has his hand on his glass. At the same time the source took this picture, NOPD records show Vappie was on the clock being paid by taxpayers. This picture goes to the heart of the questions we've been asking and the heart of the Fed's investigation into the mayor and Vappie. Before we start looking at the reports at the center of the Fed's investigation, it's important to remember a few things. If the mayor had any type of relationship with a private citizen, we wouldn't report on it. What the mayor does on our off time is not newsworthy. But the mayor is Officer Jeffrey Vappie's boss. He is her subordinate. She assigns his work duties, his hours, essentially approves overtime. And that's one of the main reasons we reported about the mayor and Vappie's time outside the office. August 2nd of 2022, 8:03 in the morning, Mayor LaToya Cantrell arrived at the city-owned Upper Pentaba apartment in the car with her security detail, NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie. He walks her to the door and leaves, but minutes later, Vappie entered this door that leads to the apartment, and for 5 hours and 40 minutes of his workday, Vappie stayed inside that door. A public records request shows between 10 and 6 that day, the mayor didn't make or take one work call on her cell phones, and for those 8 hours only responded to 2 emails. One at 10:56 a.m., 2 sentences asking that a complaint about a mechanical permit be forwarded to the correct person, and one at 2:06 p.m., 2 sentences again to someone with a vieux carré commission. Much of the workday, an NOPD officer in charge of protecting the mayor was paid to spend nearly 6 hours of his workday inside a city-owned apartment building with Mayor Cantrell.
Is it fair for us to ask questions about this?
It's fair to ask questions because this is a taxpayer-owned property, and these are employees paid by the taxpayers. If the mayor is off duty and she's at home in her private residence, then whatever she does there is her business. Nobody's going to ask questions about that. The citizens are not going to concern themselves with that.
We began by requesting 45 days worth of video from a public security camera right outside the entrance to the city-owned apartment. An analysis of those 45 days showed for the 35 days we spotted Cantrell at the apartment, Officer Jeffrey Vappie was inside for 27 of them. Each day, the minimum amount of total time he spent there in one day was 1 hour and 1 minute. All totaled, in 27 days, he was at the city-owned apartment for more than 112 hours. That video reveals out of the 4 officers paid to protect the mayor during that time, Vappie is the only one who ever entered her apartment. In other words, the camera footage shows officers Luis Martinez and Robert Monlin and Sheriff Deputy Charles Ellis never entered this door. They didn't spend a minute inside, while Vappie went there 47 different times in 27 days, sometimes there more than once in a day. August 16th of 2022, about an hour before Vappie went on the clock, he arrived at the French Quarter apartment. Minutes before his NOPD shift started, Vappie and the mayor left in workout clothes. More than an hour later, 10 a.m., they returned to the Pantaba and stayed there for more than 4 hours. According to her city calendar, the mayor was scheduled to make welcome remarks at 9:30 a.m. at a Baptist Foreign Mission convention. During that time, she was in the Upper Pantaba with Officer Vappie as well. We confirmed at the convention she didn't make remarks, but sent someone else in her place. The mayor also missed a 1:15 p.m. pop-in meeting with Senator Bill Cassidy's team. At 2:16, there's Officer Vappie leaving the Pantaba, not wearing the workout clothes he arrived in, but instead a suit. At 2:30, the mayor's calendar noted an in-person meeting about the Sewage and Water Board. 7 minutes after that meeting was supposed to start, the mayor left the apartment, dressed for work. So again, on August 16th, the mayor and Officer Vappie spent 4.5 hours in the apartment in the middle of the workday. According to a response to our records request, the mayor didn't send one email during that time, and the city says she didn't make one work phone call on her cell phones.
Taxpayers are wondering, is business getting done? If business is getting done, are you carrying out your official duties? Are you doing the taxpayer's business?
According to NOPD timesheets, on August 9th, 2022, Officer Vappie went on the clock at 8 a.m. There he is entering the Upper Pantaba apartment at 7:55 with a grocery bag and a case of bottled water. The mayor arrived about 45 minutes later at 8:42. According to the mayor's schedule, on August 9th, Vappie wasn't assigned as a security on duty. The city wouldn't tell us his assignment that day, but both Vappie and Cantrell remained in the Upper Pantaba building most of the workday. Vappie left at 3:09 in the afternoon, all while getting paid by the NOPD.
But he's actually with her during that time when he's not assigned to her. If that's also happening, that raises a question.
It is happening.
That tells me we're paying him, again, the citizens of New Orleans and Orange Parish, we're paying the police to have this guy work. If he's assigned to do X, but he's not doing X, he's allegedly protecting the mayor in an apartment where she probably doesn't need protection. Again, that's not only the unseemly aspect of it, but it's a misuse of his time.
That same day, August 9th, Vappie went off the clock at 8 p.m., but he and the mayor both returned to the apartment a little later after 8:30. Vappie left about 4 hours later, past midnight at 12:42 a.m. Fast forward the camera nearly an hour. There's the mayor leaving at 1:26 a.m. That night, city records show the mayor didn't send one email and said she didn't make one call for the city on her cell phones. Even off the clock, Vappie spent more than 4 hours in the Pantaba.
They're going there for long periods of time where it appears she's not doing any work during that time, no phone calls, no meetings, no emails. And if she needs protection inside this apartment in the Pantaba, why is he the only one of her detail that ever goes in there? And why sometimes does he leave before she does, letting her walk out the door and walk to some other car blocks away, unprotected by him?
We have many more examples. September 9th of 2022, Vappie inside the Upper Pentapa for nearly 7 hours. The mayor's calendar shows he wasn't scheduled to be on duty as her security, but he was paid for 12 hours of work that day, much of it inside the French Quarter apartment. We found Vappie entering the apartment early many mornings, leaving late at night, mostly alone, sometimes there before the mayor arrived. We found several days where we spotted Vappie on the balcony of the apartment, watering plants, while being paid by the NOPD. Like September 7th, there he is at 6:10 at night. His NOPD timesheet says he was on the clock until 8 that night. Records show Vappie joined the mayor's security team in late May of 2021. In 2022, before being temporarily removed from her security team as our investigations began to air, he had earned more money than the other officers on her team, being paid more than $110,000 in 2022. Vappie has also accompanied the mayor on some of her trips. In fact, after reviewing her travel records, we found Vappie is the only officer who flew first class next to the mayor on a trip to San Francisco. There he is in seat 3E, the mayor in 3F. The cost of that flight for Vappie, $821. But there's more.
Thank you, Mr. Vappie, for joining the board.
In March of 2022, the mayor appointed Vappie to the board of the Housing Authority of New Orleans. Here's audio of him attending his first meeting.
Commissioner Vappie?
Vappie, present.
According to his LinkedIn page, Vappie doesn't have any experience in public housing, but the mayor still appointed him to the board.
That raises questions because generally speaking, it's standard practice not to appoint public employees to public boards simply because there could be a potential conflict of interest, especially when you're dealing with a law enforcement officer.
His first Hanno meeting on March 29th started at 4 p.m. and lasted past 6. For the entire meeting, Vappie was paid by taxpayers to work for the NOPD, but instead attended a volunteer job as Hanno board member. We found 2 more days in 2022, August 23rd.
Commissioner Jeffrey Vappie.
Present.
And September 20th.
Commissioner Jeffrey Vappie.
Present.
Of Vappie attending a Hanno board meeting while being paid to protect and serve.
Well, I think taxpayers would say if he's a police officer, why isn't he doing police work?
Ultimately, both Robert Collins and Joel Friedman say questions need to be directed to the mayor. She is Vappie's superior, his supervisor. And both say taxpayers will want to know why the mayor and her police security detail spend so many hours of the workday alone inside a city-owned building. Like on Thursday, August 11th of 2022. Other than a few quick trips outside the apartment, the two were there from 7:45 a.m. until 1:45 in the afternoon. The next day, they both arrived around 8:30 a.m. and left separately after 11. On Thursday, August 18th, there's the mayor at 2:49 in the afternoon watering plants on the balcony. About an hour later at 3:40, Vappie arrived in an NOPD uniform. 78 minutes later, he left the French Quarter apartment building. All time during the workday, Vappie spent hours at the apartment, all examples of him doing it while being paid by taxpayers. We sent a lengthy letter to the mayor's communications staff and Vappie, laying out our findings and questions being raised in this story. The mayor's office sent us a response that didn't directly address the points raised in the story, but did say while we do not comment on the mayor's executive protection policies and protocols, we do attest to the fact that Officer Vappie and all members of the mayor's executive protection team personify the level of devotion expected and required as a public servant to the city of New Orleans. We acknowledge their sacrifice and honor their service. But Friedman and Collins say the mayor should respond directly to taxpayers, our viewers, who are paying thousands of dollars for an NOPD officer and the mayor to spend part of many workdays outside the office. And we quickly uncovered more significant findings that forced the police department to temporarily reassign Officer Vappie and launch an internal investigation by the NOPD's Public Integrity Bureau. In late August of 2022, Mayor Cantrell made a 3-day trip to the nation's capital to meet with the Department of Justice. The mayor arrived in D.C. on an early Sunday flight, accompanied by NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie, who served as her security on duty. The mayor had no meetings on her calendar that day, but Vappie billed taxpayers for 15 hours of work, 7 a.m. until 10 at night. The next day, the only event on the mayor's calendar was a 1:30 p.m. meeting. That day, Vappie claims he worked another 15 hours, from 7 a.m. until 10 at night. Then on Tuesday, the two flew back, according to the mayor's schedule, an early morning flight. Records show that flight arrived back in New Orleans 23 minutes early, just before 10 a.m. Those records show the mayor had two other members of her security team on duty that day. Still, after returning to New Orleans around 10 in the morning, Vappie continued to get paid, going off the clock at 9 that night.
And so I think that, the taxpayers are going to be concerned that, we are paying city employees, but we have no evidence that they're actually doing the work that we're paying them for.
Since joining the security team in late May of 2021, Vappie has traveled more with the mayor than any other member of her detail. Before his retirement in June of last year, Luis Martinez, the longest-serving member of the mayoral executive team, hadn't traveled once. Robert Monlin 5 times, Vappie 8 and 18 months. And a review of those trips and his timesheets raised questions about the money he's being paid by taxpayers. Friday, January 21st of 2022, Cantrell and Vappie returned from D.C., the late afternoon flight, the only item on her calendar that day. Records show the 5:24 flight arrived 10 minutes late. Still that day, Vappie billed taxpayers for 16 hours of work, 7 in the morning until 11 at night. More than 5 hours after returning to New Orleans, Vappie finally clocked out of his shift. In early April, Vappie traveled with the mayor to San Francisco for a conference on climate change. The meeting wrapped up on Friday at noon, but the two didn't leave until the next night, taking a red-eye back on Saturday night at 11:05. The flight landed at 5:22 a.m. back in New Orleans. We've confirmed it was on time. The day of that 5:22 a.m. arrival back home, Vappie stayed on the clock until 12 that night. So on Saturday and Sunday, when all he apparently did was fly in a plane from San Francisco back to New Orleans, taxpayers paid Vappie for 30 hours of work, 15 hours on Saturday, another 15 on Sunday. Vappie also protected the mayor on the trip for the failed launch of the Artemis rocket in August of 2022. The 4:10 p.m. flight back on Tuesday, August 30th, arrived 17 minutes early. That day, Vappie claimed in his timesheet, though, he worked from 8 in the morning until 9 at night. We sent an email to the mayor's office laying out each finding in this story. A spokesperson refused to respond to our request, unwilling to either clarify or provide us with a statement.
Once again, we see this administration doesn't answer direct questions from the media or from the public. I mean, these are simple questions. If they have the facts to respond and justify these expenditures, they should simply reply.
Our questions go beyond the travel, though. September 19th of 2021, the mayor had 2 people on duty for security, Vappie and Robert Monlin. The mayor had no events scheduled that day, but Vappie billed taxpayers for 24 straight hours of work, 7 a.m. Sunday until 7 a.m. Monday. But there's more. He then claims he went off the clock for an hour. Then at 8 a.m. Monday morning, he clocked in again and worked 15 straight hours to 11 that night. He claims to provide protection for the mayor for 39 of 40 hours.
I could understand if there was a hurricane or something like that, but under normal circumstances, there's 4 members of the security team. If somebody's worked 24 hours straight, then there's somebody else that should be available to work the next day. So those are things that investigators, I think, need to dig their teeth into and obtain answers to determine if there are, in fact, any abnormalities with the hours that he's billing the city or the relationship that it exists between the mayor and a member of her security team.
According to city records, Vappie did not attend a 2021 trip to Dayton, Ohio with the mayor. The mayor didn't return to New Orleans until the night of Saturday, October 2nd. Yet Vappie entered 17 hours of work on his timesheet, 7 a.m. until 12 that night. The next day, the mayor had a blank schedule, but Vappie claims he worked 15 hours, 7 a.m. until 10 at night. Even look at the records for a Sunday in October, 2 community walks and a festival. Yet Vappie claims he started work at 7 in the morning and stayed on the clock past midnight, a 19-hour day that ended at 2 a.m. Long hours on the clock earned Vappie plenty of extra money, some of which he made while spending long stretches of time inside the city's Upper Pentaba apartment, like August 9, 2022. That day, Vappie was paid by taxpayers for 7 hours while inside the Upper Pentaba, but he stayed there for an additional nearly 5 hours off the clock, raising serious concerns for the head of the Metropolitan Crime Commission. All totaled, Vappie spent 10 hours and 5 minutes there, leaving at 12:42 a.m., with the mayor departing alone an hour later.
So if your video footage confirms that the officer is arriving separately from the mayor, it would seem to indicate that he's not there to provide security to her. Because if she came and went on his own and he arrived separately and left before she did, or after she did, then obviously he's not driving her anywhere or providing security work for her. Those are, I think, symptoms that need to be investigated by Internal Affairs to determine if, in fact, there are any violations of either law or departmental policies with respect to what's been transpiring by a member of the mayor's security team.
The NOPD launched an investigation and reassigned Vappie pending the outcome. But that investigation was only focused on one type of violation, that Vappie worked longer than 16 hours 35 minutes in a 24-hour period, which is against NOPD policy, which he's violated at least 12 times. Goyeneche thinks the NOPD should have launched a broader investigation into other possible wrongdoing.
The NOPD has conflict of interest policies. And if an officer becomes involved in any type of anything above a professional relationship with the subject of their work, they're supposed to disclose that, and they get moved. So I think what you have presented to me is sufficient evidence to justify a public integrity investigation into what has been transpiring between the mayor and a member of her security detail. And it's not about trying to determine anything other than, is the officer in violation of any departmental policies or any criminal laws?
Goyeneche wonders if Vappie is receiving special treatment, which would also be a violation of city policy that says no special treatment or favoritism shall be given to anyone because of connections or relationships.
So the mayor could be in violation of
the own policy. And of course, the mayor initially believed that the policies banning first-class travel didn't apply to her, and she found out that they did. So I believe those policies apply to her as well.
Adding to questions about special treatment, this comment by Mayor Cantrell when she called the Public Integrity Bureau investigation into Vappie a witch hunt.
I think that the investigation that has been ongoing is one that we can stand by. I know initiated by PIB, one that has been thorough, even one that I would classify as a witch hunt.
The mayor's office refused to answer questions related to the details, including what members of her security detail are supposed to do on days they aren't assigned a protector. The NOPD told us a sergeant signs off on Vappie's timesheets. That sergeant is unnamed. Our team compared video from the Pentaba to Cantrell's schedule. Our findings led 2 political analysts to conclude the mayor might not be working as much as many taxpayers expect. Monday, August 1st, 2022, Mayor Cantrell's city calendar is empty. No meetings, no scheduled phone calls or events. It's listed as an all-day in New Orleans. That day, the mayor arrived at the city's Upper Pentaba apartment at 12:33 in the afternoon. A few minutes later, she left and returned with a tote bag. She stayed at the apartment that afternoon and evening, even watering plants at 5:37. The city says the mayor didn't make any phone calls on her cell phones that day. That afternoon, the mayor returned 18 emails, most short responses, a sentence or a few words. Even if the mayor is doing some city work at the Upper Pantaba, political analysts say she should be doing all of her work during the day at City Hall.
I mean, you don't expect the mayor to, be there pulling the levers at City Hall, but I would expect she would exercise some symbolic leadership and be there at City Hall while her people are there, working and, again, trying to deal with the situation that the city faces.
So your point, if she's not at a meeting or an event during the workday, symbolically at the very least, she should be at City Hall.
Yeah, absolutely, because that shows that she's committed to her responsibilities. And so I think that would then filter down into the people who work for her.
Tuesday, August 9th, 2022, NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie arrived at the Upper Pantaba apartment just before 8 a.m. He wasn't listed as her security duty that day, but when the mayor arrived less than an hour later, they both stayed there most of the workday. The mayor had nothing scheduled on her calendar that morning, but did have 5 meetings later that day. The first at 12:30, a regional planning commission meeting. 20 minutes after that meeting started, Cantrell sent an email saying she wouldn't be making it. She also had a 2 p.m. meeting scheduled with the head of the RTA, Alex Wiggins. At 12:53, she sent her scheduler an email, the subject line, phone disabled. The message asked her to reschedule that RTA meeting and said she would be in at 3:30 because she had to deal with a personal matter. Vappie left the Upper Pantaba at 3:09, the mayor at 3:39. From 8:42 in the morning until 3 o'clock, the mayor and Vappie were inside the Pantaba. City records show the mayor did not make one work phone call and only sent 3 emails, the 2 we told you about, and another at 12:31 about some streetlights not working. So according to records obtained from the city, for 6 hours of a workday, the mayor canceled 2 meetings, sent 3 emails, made no phone calls, and stayed in the Upper Pantaba with a member of her security team who was also on the clock getting paid at that time.
Well, if she's not going to be off-site, I think people would expect for her to be in the mayor's office, in the actual mayor's office.
In City Hall.
In City Hall.
In late 2022, we went to a news conference to ask Mayor Cantrell about what she's doing inside the city-owned Upper Pantaba apartment for hours during the workday. She refused to directly answer that question and stopped us from asking a follow-up. One by one, reporter by reporter, the mayor took questions on the state of the city, each reporter getting an initial question and a follow. When our station had a turn, we asked the mayor about our recent series of stories that showed her spending much of the workday inside a city-owned apartment, doing little work. Much of that time, the mayor had a visitor, a member of her executive protection team, NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie. The two spent hours of the workday in the Pantaba. Records show the mayor sent few emails and made no work calls during the time Vappie was with her. She even canceled meetings while the two remained in the Pantaba.
Mayor Cantrell, you say you're working 24/7, and the records show that you spend a lot of the workday at the Upper Pantaba apartment with an NOPD officer. The city has crime and infrastructure issues. You've spent nearly 20% of the year out of town or out of the country, many of those trips with an NOPD officer. Is any of that appropriate?
So, Mr. Zurich, thank you for being here. It kind of freaks me out to see you, quite frankly, because you've been very inappropriate, in my opinion. But relative to your accusations, none of them add up at all.
The mayor did not dispute any of the facts we've reported, including limited meetings with key city employees. The mayor finished answering that question by touting the results and work of her and her staff.
But in regards to my work for the city of New Orleans, it's really unmatched. I can point to results on the ground. The budget hearings that are underway right now speak to the work that my administration and my team has done and continues to do for the city of New Orleans relative to public safety, relative to housing, relative to infrastructure, and I can literally go on and on and on. But what you will not challenge me on are the results of my administration and the priorities that we've set for this city, which in fact, the city of New Orleans has been recently included top 10 cities, fastest growing cities in the United States of America because we're doing the work. And more importantly, based on the budget that is happening right now, It demonstrates the priorities of my administration and the priorities even touted in the article in terms of where we need to continue to focus so that we become better and stronger than this city has ever been before. We're on a great trajectory, and the best is yet to come. Thank you so much.
So again, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you very
I
much.
thought I get a follow-up question.
No, thank you.
Why don't everybody else gets a follow-up. Why don't I get a follow-up question?
Sir, you're the one who touts having over 680 hours of me, filming me, at an apartment, sir, that I have, one, the authority to use in my capacity as mayor of the city of New Orleans. So, sir, you've done more than any other reporter in this room that has been, in my opinion, in violation of me as a human being. So with that, sir, thank you very much.
It's a public property, and it's public.
Thank you very much,
It's
sir.
a public
Thank
records
you.
request. We got the
Thank you,
video
sir.
via public records request.
We know, and thank you very much.
Cantrell repeatedly claimed her use of the apartment was in line with past mayors.
I am utilizing the Pontabla apartment consistent with the guidelines as well as the uses not only of previous mayors but also in my stead as mayor of the city of New Orleans.
Even calling it her apartment.
It shows up even around my apartment that I have a right to utilize.
However, sources told us most other mayors used it to entertain guests for meetings and to occasionally spend the night. One mayor even went on the record with Fox 8 saying he never used the apartment the way Cantrell did.
It's not meant to be a residence for the mayor, period. It is not meant to be a residence for the mayor.
Mark Morial served as mayor from 1994 to 2002.
It was intended to be a place to entertain or a place where guests could spend a night. Maybe a mayor could spend a night there, here or there, if it was necessary to make a public appearance in the area, but it was never meant to be a residence for the mayor of the city of New Orleans, period.
Morial told us he didn't recall spending a single night at the apartment during his term. That led a political analyst and crime watchdog to confirm the mayor wasn't being honest with taxpayers.
It would be very easy for the current mayor to get on the phone with previous mayors and ask them what the apartment was used for. That would be very easy. Even in the language, the whole language is problematic. I mean, publicly she keeps saying, my apartment. It's not her apartment. It's the city's apartment, that she can use for specific purposes, but it is not her apartment.
That's the city of New Orleans' apartment. It's not her apartment. And she's not the president of the United States. That isn't the White House. She's not the governor of Louisiana. That isn't the governor's mansion. That's the city's apartment. It's never intended, and according to the former mayor of the city of New Orleans, he never used it as a residence. That is just, an apartment that's available for occasional use, not in the method that she's used it.
Other members of Cantrell's security team said they were concerned about whether Vappie and Cantrell's relationship had crossed a line.
So they all noticed it. So, we were like, what is this dude doing,
What those who worked closely with Vappie had to say to investigators coming up. We obtained leaked audio recordings from the NOPD's internal investigation into Vappie.
And you would change your clothes at the top.
That's correct.
Those recordings showed some fellow officers were upset and believed the relationship between Vappie and Cantrell was inappropriate.
The boss, meaning the mayor.
In nearly 4 hours of interviews from a Public Integrity Bureau investigation,
And any other instructions would come from the boss, who is the mayor.
NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie repeatedly referred to the mayor as his supervisor.
From the boss, which is the mayor.
But it's clear the NOPD investigators wanted to know if a more personal relationship existed between the mayor and one member of her executive protection team.
Back to the mayor's detail. When you was at the Pontabla, what would you do?
Sit and wait.
Where?
At the Pontabla.
Where at in the Pontabla?
I don't recall. Common area.
Our story showed Vappie spending long hours both on and off duty inside the city-owned French Quarter Upper Pentaba apartment. Video from a public security camera operated by the city showed Vappie entered often and even went out onto the balcony and spent time watering plants. And the video showed the mayor and Vappie exercising together in the morning, most of the time while Vappie wasn't even on the NOPD clock.
There came a time when the boss wanted to do it in the morning time, which I agreed with because it was before shift. And I was like, I'm cool with that because I want to get in shape too.
Right. So how did those other officers have an opportunity to say no to the boss on the clock?
In the car, like we're driving right now. The boss said, I want to go walking. I want to exercise. I'll do that.
Well, how did they give an opportunity to say no?
Because in the car, she put it out there. Right?
Right.
And if the guys wanted to come walking with us, they definitely could have.
But they understood, I mean, I'm sure they understood like you understood that the ultimate authority says this is what I want to do. You and your partner, right, are together. Am I incorrect with this?
Yeah.
So how did they not, what happened to where he says Robert Marlin was your partner, right?
Yeah.
So did Robert Marlin ever accompany you when you went jogging or working before or after with the mayor?
No.
Okay, so this was always done by yourself?
Yes, while he and I were working.
Okay, while you and he were working, it was always done by yourself?
Correct.
The video shows Vappie arriving at the Pentaba apartment in workout clothes, then hours later leaving in a different outfit, something Vappie admitted he never did when he was previously on the executive protection team with former Mayor Ray Nagin.
So I would show up at the Pentaba, dressed to walk. We would go walking. Then after that, I would had access to go to the Pentaba, change my clothes, and then go to work.
From the Pentaba?
From the Pentaba.
And you would change your clothes at the Pentaba?
That's correct.
In the same house with your principal?
Different places inside.
That's not what I asked you. In the same house with your principal?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
So you would go, and you telling me now that's something that they taught you in training too?
It has nothing to do with training.
What does it have to do with? Tell me, how did you feel like that?
I didn't feel anyway. This was a privilege, or this was the boss.
Did you ever do that with Mayor Nagin?
No, I didn't do it.
Did you ever go inside of any apartment or any place that Mayor Nagin was at and change clothes?
No.
We found many instances of Vappie entering the door that leads to the Upper Pentaba apartment using a key, but listen to how he answered this question.
Do you have a key to the apartment, the Pentaba?
No.
Does any members of the executive protection team have a key to the Pentaba?
I'm not. I don't know.
NOPD investigators also interviewed other members of the executive protection team, like now retired Orleans Sheriff Deputy Charles Ellis.
Yeah. Do you think Vappie crossed the line with the mayor? In your own personal opinion?
I think he broke protocol. I can say that. Now, crossing with the mayor, I think you got to ask the mayor. You know, did she feel violated, or did she feel?
As it was portrayed on the news.
Yes.
Do you think the actions you saw on the news brought discredit to your profession, executive protection?
Absolutely. 100%. Yes.
So do you see any reason why he should have walked in jogging clothes and walked out in a suit?
I don't know what the reason is.
Have you ever worked out with the member?
No.
Ellis says he approached Vappie about the relationship.
Okay. What I noticed about him was that he was being overly charismatic with the mayor. Like, say we are at, she go to eat dinner. One of her favorite places, Houston's. And protocol, or no, what protocol is, you do not sit with your principal at the table. Because if you're sitting with your principal at the table, who's watching your back? You see?
Right.
So I noticed that, and I brought that to his attention. He said, he agreed, and he said, yeah, I see how that could look, you know.
Replay one of those instances the way you brought it to his attention. Tell me about how it went. It was, I think, Houston's.
what's the restaurant on St. Charles and Julia? Herb Street.
Okay.
Another one of our spots. And it was after seeing a couple of incidents. I told him, I said, hey man, I said, look, I said, I don't know what's going on, but that what you're doing is inappropriate. That you've been to executive protection school, you know. I said, now from a security standpoint, I said, you not only putting yourself in danger, but you're putting the man else in danger because you can't see behind you if there's somebody who wants to do her harm. He agreed. Oh yeah, man, I understand how I look. You know.
Did he give a reason why he was doing it?
Nope.
Okay, and what happened after that?
That's about it. Once I told him that, you know, I kind of figured, I hope he would take to heart that and move on and learn from him. And I guess not after we, fast forward, we see all this mess with this department.
And Ellis says he brought up the possible relationship with other members of the executive protection team, Robert Monlin and Luis Martinez.
And you talked to him about that?
Yeah.
All right. Did you talk to any of the NOPD guys about that?
I think we talked as a whole. Yeah, as a whole.
What do you mean when you say as a whole?
Well, because they noticed it. They witnessed it.
And when you say they, give me some names.
Robert and Lewis.
Okay.
Robert and Lewis. So they all noticed it. So, we were like, what is this dude doing? He knows, he worked with Ray Negan, the former mayor. He know you don't do that. Now, unless you invite it, but you still leave yourself open to say, with all due respect, ma'am, no, because of my position. And they have to understand that.
But during his interview, Monlin never brought up this conversation and says at the time he never thought any personal relationship existed.
Well, I'm going to ask you this. Talk to me about the relationship that you recognized when y'all were together in the car with him and the mayor.
It really, honestly, bro, I didn't see anything.
You didn't see anything, or you didn't want to see anything?
The relationship didn't change.
You never saw nothing strange that made you question,
No.
Monlin says he saw the stories that aired on Fox 8 showing Vappie spending long hours inside the apartment, one night even leaving around 1 in the morning.
How'd you feel about that once that news story aired and you see that he's in there various times? Is there any one thing that you saw that was really, really strange to you?
Probably, looking at the times and stuff
What could you think? What do you talk about what you think? Give me a visual picture. Rob, what I need to know, I need to get a visual picture of what you was thinking. I need to get a visual picture.
Once I seen the video?
Once you seen the video?
I was flabbergasted, man. It was shocked like the average person, I would say.
Why were you flabbergasted? Why you specifically?
Because I didn't know. I didn't see all that. All the comings and goings. I didn't see all that.
While Monlin says he didn't witness any improper behavior, he did leave the NOPD investigator with this.
So do you feel like his actions embarrassed the unit?
I would say so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You feel like he crossed that line of professionalism with his protection duties?
The way it looks, yeah. Look bad.
The NOPD investigator concluded his interview with Vappie, asking if he violated a policy that doesn't allow personal relationships. While his co-workers believe it might appear one exists, here's how Vappie answered the question.
So let me repeat my question before you say it again. Based on this policy, is there a personal relationship? Based on the definition that's in this policy, all right?
I understand it.
Okay. Again. Is there a personal relationship?
No.
Thank you.
Can you describe the relationship that you have with your protectee?
Again, professional.
Despite criticism from the federal monitor overseeing the NOPD's consent decree, the Public Integrity Bureau ended its investigation into Vappie by concluding he violated department policies of professional conduct and performance of duty and issued him 2 letters of reprimand. The monitor argued the investigation should have looked into whether Vappie committed payroll fraud, but the NOPD argued PIB investigations are strictly administrative. Vappie was removed from Cantrell's security team during the investigation, but was then reinstated for a year until we uncovered more questions. In April of this year, this picture shows Vappie and the mayor dining on the balcony of a French Quarter restaurant. At the same time a source took this picture, Vappie was being paid by taxpayers. And remember this picture we showed you from 2022? Vappie and the mayor at Doris Metropolitan Restaurant. You can see both have filled wine glasses. Vappie has his hand on his glass. Again, at the time of this picture, Vappie was being paid by taxpayers. The NOPD once again removed Vappie from the executive protection team after these pictures, launching investigations into both.
We appear to have certain documented circumstances where he's actually on the clock and he has a wine glass in his hand. Well, that's a whole nother violation. Police officers can't drink alcohol while they're on duty. So, I think they're just continuing to not only flaunt the law, but to flaunt their appearances before the public, that they're basically showing that they don't care what people think about them. They don't care about social norms. They don't care about the law. They don't care about the image of the city.
Look, do I know if Mayor X might have had lunch with Officer Smith someplace along the way? Maybe. But it's not something that meets the general perception that your job is to make sure that they're safe. But look, it's the mayor who said she's so well known she has to take people all over the world. In the one place where she is well known, you would think that the officers would be more on guard.
The federal investigation into the mayor and Vappie appears to be nearing an end.
Eddie doesn't do real estate law, he's a criminal lawyer. I think the mayor may see that she has some criminal liability going forward.
Coming up, the latest on that investigation and the fallout from our findings. The day after our first story aired, Vappie's wife filed for divorce. We didn't report on the filing at first until she amended it, claiming Jeffrey Vappie had an affair with someone she called Mrs. LC. A source confirmed to Fox 8 that is New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell. In the divorce filing, Vappie's wife claimed her husband had been in an ongoing sexual relationship with Cantrell since May of 2021, when Vappie joined her executive protection team. The filing claimed Mrs. LC and Vappie engaged in a sexual relationship and cited specific dates in August and September of 2022, many of which were also highlighted in our prior reports. A crime watchdog says for Vappie, a relationship could violate several NOPD policies, and that violations could be even more severe if during the time he was paid by taxpayers, he wasn't doing work expected of him by the police department.
Well, involvement in a romantic relationship with one of his assigned duties, professionalism, performance of duty, adherence to law, and honesty and truthfulness.
Raphael Goyeneche says the mayor might have also committed violations.
She is the chief elected official in the city of New Orleans. She knows full well that officers are supposed to be performing their duties, and she is essentially Officer Vappie's assignment. So if she is having him come visit her, and this petition talks about dates, and the videos that you have of Officer Vappie coming and going from that Pontabla building, and none of the other officers were coming and going from that, those are all indications of potential payroll fraud, malfeasance in office, and there's the corresponding federal violations that could apply to those same factual circumstances there.
For the mayor too?
Absolutely.
So the mayor could have some criminal, questions raised with her here, potentially.
I believe so. I believe so.
In fact, our reporting shows those questions are part of what federal investigators are asking.
It was completely designed to humiliate me,
and to politically embarrass me.
6 years ago, the mayor of Nashville at first denied having an affair with her security detail.
Was he getting paid while you were having relations with him?
No.
Then Mayor Megan Barry took her bodyguard on taxpayer-funded trips out of town, while the two carried on a secret affair.
Do you think there was anything, though, that was inappropriate in terms of, did he really need to be there? Did he really need to be with you while you're going to a concert or something like that?
When I'm out, I'm working all the time. And so I let the police department make the decisions about how I should be staffed.
In 2018, Barry and her bodyguard pleaded guilty to state charges of felony theft. Tennessee investigators looked at the 10 city-funded trips Barry took with her bodyguard and the tens of thousands of dollars in overtime the bodyguard collected while claiming to protect the mayor. The charges centered around an affair while taxpayers paid the bodyguard. And now sources with knowledge of the ongoing federal investigation into Mayor Cantrell say federal investigators are asking similar questions here about the mayor and her bodyguard, NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie. While the charges would be different from the Nashville case, federal versus state, sources say the concept of both investigations is the same.
Well, the similarities are that you're talking about a police officer that was part of an executive protection team for the mayor of Nashville, was billing the city for work that he was not actually performing. So if he was not protecting the mayor, was engaged in a personal relationship, that essentially would have been the basis of the state charges that resulted in him being charged and the mayor of Nashville being charged and ultimately resigning. This would just be taking the same principles to the federal side of the ledger.
Following our reports, the New Orleans City Council passed an ordinance that limited the use of the apartment and prohibited overnight stays. But we uncovered over Essence Festival weekend in July of last year, the mayor and relatives and friends stayed at the apartment. There's the mayor and a member of her executive protection team wheeling in her suitcase. On Sunday, July 2nd, there's the mayor and 4 women arriving at 1:54 a.m. The lights going off at 4:12. The mayor didn't leave until that Sunday morning at 10:02.
Well, it looks bad because it's a very clear law, and it appears that the mayor is deliberately violating the law.
After that violation, the city council introduced an ordinance to permanently remove the apartment from the mayor's control, giving it back to the French Market Corporation. The ordinance passed in a 4-2 vote, as Councilmember Freddie King was not at the meeting. Mayor Cantrell quickly vetoed that ordinance. Weeks later, the council held another vote on whether to override Cantrell's veto. In a 5-2 vote, this time the council ended the fight for good, stripping the apartment from the mayor's use.
I think for a lot of council members and the public, the fact that you immediately saw it revert to personal use with no public purpose is what really was the straw that broke the camel's back.
After our investigations began to air, Fox 8 learned the FBI was investigating Cantrell and Vappie and that both have hired well-known criminal defense attorneys. Sources tell Fox 8 News Cantrell has retained defense lawyer Eddie Castaigne, while Vappie has hired former U.S. Attorney Harry Rosenberg. Over the years, Eddie Castaigne has worked on high-profile criminal cases in New Orleans, recently representing Ashton Ryan, the former CEO of First NBC Bank, who was sentenced to 14 years in prison.
Eddie has been doing criminal law for at least 30 and probably a lot more years than that. He has handled many high-profile cases. Well, Eddie's a very good lawyer, but I think what you need to take from this is Eddie doesn't do real estate law. He's a criminal lawyer. I think the mayor may see that she has some criminal liability going forward, and that's why she retains somebody like Eddie Castaigne.
Cantrell retains Castaigne as sources say federal investigators have asked questions to witnesses and subpoenaed records. The sources with knowledge of the investigation tell Fox 8 News several city vendors have been questioned whether they provided Cantrell with any gifts or money. The FBI has also subpoenaed records from these vendors. Cantrell has not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing, and our sources didn't say whether these interviews and records provided any proof of a criminal offense.
Well, I think what you may want to look towards here is they're probably looking into whether or not there was any type of quid pro quo, this for that. Like, did the mayor give them something in return for whatever she got from them? I think that's probably would be most likely what the FBI is looking at.
Sources tell us federal investigators continue to look into NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappie, a member of Cantrell's executive protection team, who spent on and off-duty hours inside the city-owned Upper Pentaba apartment with the mayor and frequently traveled with her in city business. Sources say Vappie has retained former U.S. Attorney Harry Rosenberg.
Harry's another good criminal defense attorney. Harry was a former U.S. attorney. It just indicates to me that everybody's putting in their mouthpieces and putting on their eye black because there may be a coming storm. And so they are now hiring people who are familiar with representing criminal defendants in federal court.
Our stories on Vappie raise questions about the hours he was putting on his timesheet. For example, in early April 2022, Vappie traveled with the mayor to San Francisco for a conference on climate change. The meeting wrapped up on Friday at noon, but the two didn't leave until the next night, taking a red-eye back on Saturday night at 11:05. The flight landed at 5:22 a.m. back in New Orleans. We've confirmed it was on time. The day of that 5:22 a.m. arrival back home, Vappie stayed on the clock until 12 that night. So on Saturday and Sunday, when all he apparently did was fly on a plane from San Francisco back to New Orleans, taxpayers paid Vappie for 30 hours of work, 15 hours on Saturday, another 15 on Sunday. Sources tell us the FBI is looking into Vappie's timesheets, although it's important to note Cantrell never signed off on any of his hours. That was assigned to an NOPD officer. Respondee says if the government moves forward in this case, any charges will likely need to be approved in Washington.
We've seen a lot of elected officials get indicted, but whenever you do it, what you have to do is you got to go to big justice up in Washington, D.C. and get permission. And you're not supposed to have to make a better case against them than anybody else. But I would think that sometimes you have to have a solid enough case to go ask your bosses in Washington, can we go forward?
But Respondee adds the case is moving along enough for Cantrell and Vappie to retain two well-respected defense lawyers.
Them hiring those two guys indicates to me that at least they may feel that there is a heightened likelihood that they're being looked at very, very strongly by the federal government, and they may be facing some criminal liability.
We relied heavily on public records for our investigation, from the security video to Officer Vappie's timesheets to Mayor Cantrell's schedule and travel reimbursement documentation. All the video and documents are records that any resident could have requested and obtained. Our stories raise questions about the mayor's relationship with Vappie, her subordinate, and the work she promised to do for the city. Our reports launched an FBI investigation into Cantrell and Vappie. Both are being investigated for the findings in our reports, looking at the time the mayor and Vappie spent outside the office.